Hey guys, I don't even know where to begin with this. So, if you could, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to me. Also, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. All right, let's get into it. This isn't easy for me to talk about, but I've decided it's time to share my story. It all started a few months ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a regular Tuesday evening, and I had just wrapped up a long day at work. My phone rang, and it was my mom. I knew it was her, not because of the caller ID. No, she doesn't really use that feature, but because of the ringtone. It's the one I set years ago, and the moment I hear it, I know it's her. So I picked up, expecting the usual, casual stuff. How was your day? Or, do you want to come over this weekend? But that's not what I got, not even close. Hey, honey, I need you to listen to this, she said. Her voice was shaky, like something was off. That was when I knew something wasn't right. Sure, Mom. What's going on? I asked, trying to sound casual, though I could feel my heart rate picking up. There was a long pause on the other end, and then she said, I'm sending you a voicemail. It's important. She hung up before I could respond. I remember sitting there, staring at my phone, feeling a sense of unease creep in. Why was she being so cryptic? What could be so important that she couldn't just say it to me directly? I didn't know it at the time, but that voicemail would change everything for me. I opened my messages and there it was, a voicemail from my mom. I clicked on it, heart racing, and heard her voice on the other end. Hey, honey, I just wanna let you know something. You're out of the family business. You're no longer involved. This is the decision your father and I have made. It's over. My stomach dropped. I felt a wave of confusion, anger, and disbelief all hit me at once. What the hell does that even mean? I whispered to myself. Mom? What do you mean? Why? What's going on? I couldn't help but text her back, but I didn't get a response. That was it. The moment that defined everything, the family business. I had been a part of it for years. It wasn't just a job to me. It was my life, my legacy, something I had worked hard to build. And now, just like that, I was out? It didn't make sense. But that voicemail, the finality of it, it felt so cold, so distant. My own mother telling me I was out of everything I had known in such an impersonal way. No explanation, no warning, nothing. I stood up, pacing around my apartment, trying to piece together what had just happened. Was I being dramatic? Maybe. But that voicemail, it felt like a punch to the gut. I needed answers. I couldn't just let it go. So I called her back, but she didn't answer. I called my dad. Nothing. I texted my brother, hoping he would have some sort of explanation, but he didn't respond either. It was like I was being erased from their lives, without even a conversation. I kept thinking about all the sacrifices I had made for the family. Business, long hours putting my personal life aside, making it my priority. And now this? I needed to understand why. I needed to hear it from them. I had to know what happened. But I was also terrified. What if I couldn't fix this? What if this was the end? I remember staring at the voicemail for what felt like an eternity, my finger hovering over the replay button. I wanted to hear it again, hoping there was something I missed. Maybe there was an explanation buried in there, something that made sense. But no matter how many times I played it, the words were the same. You're out. And that was it. My future with the family business was gone. I couldn't stop thinking about that voicemail. Every minute felt like an hour, and I just sat there, replaying it over and over in my mind. I was stuck in this loop of confusion and anger, trying to make sense of what had just happened. What did my mom mean by, you're out? Why was I being cut off from everything I had worked so hard for? The silence from my parents was suffocating. I had tried calling them both, but neither picked up. I left messages, texts, nothing. It felt like I was shouting into an empty room, and the more I tried, the more I felt like I was fading from their lives. I remember lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind was racing. How had things gotten this bad? Was this my fault? I replayed every interaction I'd had with them over the past few months, trying to figure out if I had missed something, some sign that this was coming, but nothing stood out. It all seemed normal. I felt like I had been blindsided. The family business was everything to me. It was my dad's pride and joy, something he'd built from the ground up. And for as long as I could remember, I had always been by his side, learning the ropes, doing everything I could to make it better. It wasn't just a job to me. It was my future. But now? Now it was like I didn't even exist in that world anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a headache. The stress was eating me alive. I needed answers. I couldn't just sit here and wait for them to tell me what was going on. So I did the one thing I swore I wouldn't do. I went to their house. I didn't want to. I didn't want to face them without knowing what I was walking into, but I had no choice. I needed to see them. I needed them to explain, face to face, why they were doing this to me. When I arrived, I stood outside their house for a few minutes, hesitating. The sun was starting to set, and the light gave everything a warm, golden glow. But nothing felt warm. I felt cold. Every step I took toward that door felt heavier than the last. I knocked, and when my mom answered, I saw her face fall immediately. She didn't even say hello, just stared at me like I was a stranger. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice shaking a little more than I had intended. She stepped aside to let me in without a word. My heart pounded in my chest as I followed her into the living room. It was like walking into a room full of ghosts. The furniture was the same. The house smelled the same, but everything felt different. Dad was sitting on the couch, looking down at his phone, his face unreadable. He didn't even look up when I walked in. "Mom, what's going on? What did that voicemail mean? Why am I being cut out?" I asked, feeling the lump in my throat grow. She glanced over at my dad, then back at me, her expression hardening. "Sit down, honey. We need to explain something to you," she said, her voice distant. I sat down across from them, anxiety gnawing at my insides. I had no idea what was coming next, but I could feel it in my gut. This wasn't going to be good. "Your father and I," she paused, then let out a deep breath. "We've been talking and we've made a decision about the business. We've been thinking about this for a while now, and we believe it's time for a change." I was getting confused. "A change? What? Does that have to do with me?" "Everything," my dad finally said, looking up from his phone. His voice was flat, like he was talking about the weather or something. "The business is changing, and we don't think you're the right fit anymore." His words hit me like a slap to the face. "What? But I've been working my ass off for this business for years, Dad." He cut me off. "You're not the same person anymore. You've changed. You're not the person we need." I felt like the room was spinning. "What are you talking about? I've always been loyal to you, to the family. I've put everything into this business, my time, my energy, my future." My mom shook her head slowly, her eyes avoiding mine. "We just think it's time for you to move on. We need someone with a different vision now." I felt my stomach twist. "A different vision? What does that even mean? You're kicking me out because I don't see things the same way anymore?" Dad didn't answer. He just stared at me with cold eyes, like I was a disappointment. A failure. I had to stop myself from screaming. My chest was tight, my fists clenched. I had always been a part of this. This was my future. How could they just take it all away? I don't understand, I whispered, my voice cracking. Why didn't you talk to me about this first? Why a voicemail? Because it's better this way, my mom said softly, almost as if she was trying to convince herself. We didn't want to drag it out. That's when I realized. This wasn't just about the business. This was about something much deeper. They were cutting me out, not because of the business, but because they were tired of me, and that hurt more than anything. I don't even remember leaving their house. One moment I was sitting there trying to process what they had just said, and the next I was outside, standing on the sidewalk, staring at my car, my mind completely numb. I couldn't believe it. How could they do this to me? I kept going over every word in my head, but nothing made sense. They weren't just firing me from the family business. They were telling me I didn't belong anymore, that I wasn't the person they had raised. Sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, my body was cold, and my thoughts were all over the place. What now? What was I supposed to do with my life? I tried calling a few friends, but no one answered. I didn't even know how to explain what had happened, and I didn't want to. The pain was too fresh. That night, I stayed in bed, tossing and turning, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely alone. I had always been close to my family, and the thought that they could just turn their backs on me like this, it was like a knife in my chest. The next morning, I decided I couldn't sit around feeling sorry for myself. I had to figure out a way to fix this. I didn't care how hard it would be, but I wasn't going to give up without a fight. So I made a plan. I would talk to them again. I would make them see how much the business meant to me, how much they meant to me, and how badly I wanted to stay a part of it. I couldn't just walk away without knowing if there was anything I could do to change their minds. I showed up at their house again, this time determined. My heart was racing, but I had to be strong. I knocked on the door, and when my mom answered, her face was unreadable. "Mom, I need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let me in, her eyes following me as I walked into the living room. Dad was sitting in his usual spot, flipping through papers, his expression cold. "I don't understand," I said, sitting down across from them. "I can't just walk away from the family business like this. It's my life. It's everything I've worked for." They both remained silent, but my mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Mom, Dad, please. I don't want to lose everything I've worked for. I've been a part of this since I was a kid. You've always told me that the business was something we built together as a family. How can you just throw me away like this?" I was pleading now, my voice breaking. My mom looked at my dad, then back at me. "Sweetheart, we've been thinking about this for a long time," she said quietly. "It's not just the business. It's everything. The way things have changed. We can't go back to what it was." I looked at her in confusion. "What do you mean? What has changed?" That's when my dad spoke up. His tone was firm, but there was a sadness in his voice that I hadn't heard before. "It's not just about the business. It's about who you've become," he said. "You've changed, and we don't recognize you anymore." I felt a lump form in my throat. "What are you talking about? I'm still me. I haven't changed that much." My mom shook her head, her eyes full of something I couldn't read. "It's not just the business, honey. You've been different for a while now. You don't have the same values we do. You don't share the same vision for the future." I blinked, trying to process her words. "Values? Vision? What are you saying?" "We've been trying to get you to see it for a long time," my dad added. "You're more interested in the money and the success than you are in the family, in what this business is really about. And that's not something we can ignore anymore." My chest tightened as the words sank in. Was this it? Was this really the reason they were pushing me out? Because they thought I cared too much about the business? About the success? It didn't make sense. I care about you guys. I care about the family, I said, my voice shaking. I've always cared, but I also care about the business. That's not a crime. But you don't see it the way we do, my mom said, tears welling up in her eyes. It's not just about the money or the power. It's about family. It's about loyalty, and you've lost sight of that. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All this time, I had thought I was doing the right thing. I had thought I was doing everything for the family, for the future, for us. But now, it felt like I was the villain. I was the one who had betrayed them. You're wrong, I whispered, almost to myself. I've never stopped caring. I never will. The silence that followed was deafening. My mom and dad sat there looking at me, but it felt like they were looking past me, like I wasn't even there. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't just about the business. This was about something deeper, something they weren't telling me. There was something they weren't saying, a reason they couldn't see me for who I was anymore. But what was it? What was really going on here? The room felt heavier now. There was an awkward, suffocating silence between us, and my mind was spinning. I had always believed that family came first, but somehow that wasn't enough anymore. My parents weren't just upset with my work ethic, they were telling me that I had changed in ways I didn't even understand. I stood up, pacing around the living room, trying to keep my emotions in check. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. I had given so much of myself to this family, to this business, and they were telling me it wasn't enough. They didn't even recognize me anymore. I turned to face them. I need you to be honest with me. What's really going on? This isn't just about the business, is it? My dad shifted in his seat, avoiding my gaze. His hands were clenched in his lap, and I could tell he was struggling to say something. My mom, on the other hand, just stared at me, her face unreadable, like she was trying to figure out how much to reveal. It was like pulling teeth. Mom. Dad, I said, my voice trembling. What are you hiding? Why are you acting like this? Why am I the one being shut out? There was a long pause, and then my dad finally spoke, his voice soft, almost apologetic. We didn't want you to find out this way, he said, his words heavy with regret. But there's something we've been keeping from you, something you don't know about the business, about your future with it. I felt my heart skip a beat. What do you mean? What's going on? My mom stood up then, pacing back and forth across the room, looking like she was trying to gather her thoughts. We didn't know how to tell you this, she began, her voice thick with emotion. But the truth is, the family business is in financial trouble, and it's been getting worse for a while now. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. What do you mean, financial trouble? You've always told me the business was doing well. My dad let out a sigh. That's what we wanted you to believe. We wanted to protect you from the reality. But the truth is, things have been going downhill. For years. The debt is piling up and we've been struggling to keep it afloat. We tried to fix it ourselves, but it's too late now. I felt like I had been hit by a ton of bricks. All this time, I had been working hard, trying to make the business a success, and they had been hiding the truth from me. The business was on the verge of collapse, and no one had told me. No one had prepared me for this. I felt betrayed. More than that, I felt foolish. I had given everything to this family, to this business, and now I was being told it was all for nothing. You kept this from me? Why? Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, my voice rising with frustration. We didn't want you to get involved in the mess, my mom said, tears welling up in her eyes. We didn't want you to have to carry this burden. We thought if we could just fix it ourselves, you wouldn't have to worry. But I could have helped, I shouted. I could have done something. You didn't even give me a chance. My dad stood up, his face flushed with emotion. We didn't want to drag you into this, okay? We were trying to protect you and it backfired. We were hoping it would work out. We thought it would all turn around, but it didn't. I was in disbelief. Everything I thought I knew was falling apart in front of me. The business wasn't just something I had been excluded from. It was something that was dying. And I had no idea. But then, something clicked. The realization hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. If the business was in trouble, then why had they let me go? Why had they pushed me out instead of bringing me in to help? Wait, I said, my voice shaky with disbelief. If the business is in trouble, why am I being cut out? Why didn't you come to me for help? I could have worked with you. My mom cut me off. Because we knew you wouldn't take it well. You have your own life now, your own career. We didn't want to drag you back into this. We thought it would be easier if we just let go. I felt a wave of anger wash over me. So, this is how it ends? You just pushed me out of the family business without any warning, without even giving me a chance to help? You just assumed I wouldn't care? My dad ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. It wasn't about not caring. It was about not wanting to burden you with something we couldn't fix. We didn't want you to have to carry the weight of all this debt, all these mistakes. We thought it was better for you to have a clean break. But I don't want a clean break, I screamed, my voice breaking. This is my life. This is my family. How could you just let go like that? For a moment, there was nothing but silence. I could see the tears in my mom's eyes, and I could tell that this was hurting her just as much as it was hurting me. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer this time. We didn't know how to tell you. We didn't know how to say it. We thought if we pushed you away, it would make it easier. But it didn't work, did it? I just stood there, unable to speak. My whole world felt like it had crumbled. The family I had trusted, the business I had worked for, it was all falling apart. That moment, standing in the living room of the house I grew up in, hearing my parents explain everything they'd kept from me for so long, was the hardest thing I'd ever experienced. I thought I was prepared for anything, but this was a betrayal I wasn't ready for. It wasn't just the business. It wasn't just the money or the debt. It was everything. They had taken away the one thing that had tied me to them, the one thing that had given me purpose, the family business. Stood there trying to catch my breath. My hands were shaking, my chest tight. I couldn't believe what they were telling me. This wasn't just about numbers or strategy. It was about everything we had built together. It was about trust. And somehow I had been excluded from all of it. I turned away from them, unable to look at their faces anymore. I didn't want to hear any more excuses. I didn't want to hear the pain in their voices, because it just made me feel worse. It made me feel like I had been in the dark for so long that I didn't even know who they were anymore. I walked to the door, stopping just before I reached the handle. You could have trusted me. You could have let me help, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My mom didn't try to stop me this time. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her eyes on me as I opened the door and stepped outside. The weight of their silence was suffocating, and I couldn't stay there for another second. The drive home was a blur. I didn't remember getting in my car, and I didn't remember driving. It was like I was on autopilot, moving through the motions without any real sense of direction. When I got back to my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was slipping away from me. My parents, the business, my whole life, it was all falling apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. I tried to reason with myself. This was just a setback, right? Maybe things would get better with time. Maybe my parents would come around. Maybe I could find a way to rebuild. But deep down, I knew better. They had made up their minds. They had cut me off for a reason, and No amount of pleading was going to change it. I knew I couldn't just let this go, though. I couldn't let them get away with shutting me out. I had spent my entire life working for that business, building it with them, only for it to all come crashing down because of some debt they hadn't told me about. It wasn't right, and I wasn't going to let it end this way. That night, I sat up in bed, making a decision. I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to let my family or the business slip away without a fight. But what could I do? I had no control over the business's financial situation. I couldn't just walk in and fix everything. It wasn't as simple as writing a check or making a few calls. The damage was done. And I had to face the fact that it wasn't just about me anymore. The future of the business was uncertain, and no matter how much I cared, it wasn't something I could fix overnight. But I wasn't about to walk away either. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story with them. I spent the next few days trying to come up with a plan, weighing my options. I considered reaching out to my friends and seeing if anyone knew someone who could help with the business's financial issues. I considered asking my parents for a meeting where we could all sit down and figure out how to move forward. But then, something else occurred to me. What if this wasn't just about saving the family business? What if this was about saving myself? Had spent so many years defining myself by the family business, by my role within it. But who was I without it? What did I want my future to look like? I had always known what I had to do. But now, for the first time in my life, I had the chance to decide what I wanted to do. Could this be an opportunity for me to start fresh? To build something of my own? To not be defined by the mistakes or expectations of my parents? I felt a sense of possibility creeping in. It was scary, and it wasn't going to be easy. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own future. I could fight to save the family business, or I could fight to create something new for myself. Either way, I wasn't going to sit back and let everything slip away without giving it my all. It was the next morning when I decided I wasn't going to let fear control me anymore. The night before, I had gone back and forth between fighting for the family business or walking away to build something of my own. And the more I thought about it, the clearer my decision became. I didn't need to keep fighting to belong in a place that no longer welcomed me. No, I was going to take control of my own destiny, no matter how terrifying that felt. I wasn't going to let the business define me or trap me in a life that wasn't truly mine, but that didn't mean I was going to completely cut myself off from the past. I still cared about my parents, about the family business. I always would. So, I knew I had to start making some difficult choices. The first thing I did was reach out to a few contacts I had in the business world. I had always been interested in entrepreneurship, but I had never given it a shot. This was the moment to start. If not for myself, then for my future. I had spent so much time trying to live up to my parents' expectations that I had ignored my own dreams. It was scary, though. Every part of me wanted to turn back. Every part of me wanted to call my parents and beg them to take me back, to tell them I could fix everything. But I knew deep down that wasn't the answer anymore. The first call I made was to a woman I had met a few years ago. Her name was Sarah, and she owned a consulting firm that helped small businesses grow and thrive. She had always been kind to me, and I respected the work she did. We had kept in touch over the years, but I had never taken her up on her offer to collaborate. "Hi, Sarah, it's been a while," I said when she picked up. My voice was shaky, but I had to do this. I'm in a bit of a bind, and I need your help." We talked for a while, and she offered some guidance. It was the first time in months I felt like I had a real plan. We discussed the idea of starting something from the ground up, something entirely my own. Not relying on my parents or the family name, but building something I could call my own. The next few days were a blur. I worked on drafting business plans, meeting with other potential partners, and looking into resources that could help me launch my idea. But it wasn't easy. Every time I sat down to make a decision, doubt crept in. Was I really ready for this? Could I really leave everything behind and go after something entirely new? But every time I thought about the family, business, about the years I had spent working for it, the sacrifices I had made, I knew I couldn't go back. It wasn't mine anymore, and I had to find a way to build something that was. Then, a few days later, I got a text message from my mom. It was brief, but it was enough to make my heart stop. "Can we talk?" I didn't know how I felt about it. I had been avoiding contact with them ever since our last conversation. Part of me wanted to ignore the message, to let the wounds heal without reopening them. But another part of me knew that this wasn't just about the business anymore. This was about us, as a family. So I agreed to meet them the following afternoon. I arrived at their house with a heavy heart. I had no idea what they wanted, but I knew this conversation was important. I had to decide where we went from here. If I was going to truly let go of the past, I needed closure. When I walked inside, they were already waiting for me. Both of them sat at the kitchen table, looking solemn. It wasn't the usual warm greeting I had come to expect. This felt different. I sat down at the table, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "What's this about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My dad looked at me first, his expression full of regret. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, "and we've come to a realization. We never should have shut you out like we did. You deserve to know the truth, and we failed you." My mom nodded, her eyes red from crying. "We thought we were protecting you, but we just pushed you away instead. We know that now." I sat there in silence for a moment, processing their words. They were apologizing, yes, but it didn't erase the hurt I had felt. I had been crushed by their actions, and no apology could take that away. Still, there was something in their voices, a sincerity I hadn't heard before. "I understand," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "I really do. But it's not just about the business anymore. It's about trust. It's about you." Both thinking I couldn't handle the truth that I wasn't capable of helping. My dad sighed, rubbing his face. "We were wrong, and we're sorry. We've always wanted what was best for you, but we didn't give you the chance to prove that for yourself." My mom reached across the table, her hand resting gently on mine. "We're proud of everything you've done, and we don't want to lose you. No matter what happens with the business, you'll always be our daughter." The air in the room felt different now. It was still heavy, but there was a shift, a sense of healing beginning to take place. I didn't know what the future held for my relationship with my parents or with the family business, but in that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't about the business. It was about us, about the love we shared, and about moving forward, together or apart. "I appreciate that," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I have to move forward too. I have to create my own path even if it's not what you imagined for me." My mom squeezed my hand, and for the first time in a while, I felt like we were on the same page. "We understand. We just want you to be happy, to find what makes you feel fulfilled." I smiled weakly, feeling the weight of the years fall off my shoulders. It wasn't going to be easy, and I didn't have all the answers, but I knew now that I wasn't alone in this. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it. The conversation with my parents left me feeling lighter. Not completely healed, but lighter. There was still so much to process, so much pain that I needed to work through. But something inside me shifted. The forgiveness, the honesty. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. As I drove home from their house that day, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led me to this point. It felt like I had been carrying around a weight for years, and for the first time I could breathe a little easier. The burden of expectations, of trying to live up to my parents' vision of me, had started to fade. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined to find my own path. The next few weeks were a blur of emotions and decisions. I spent hours on the phone with Sarah, strategizing about how to launch my own consulting business. It was a huge leap of faith, but I was ready. I could feel the energy coming back to me. I had dreams, my own dreams, and I was going to chase them no matter how terrifying that felt. I started making calls to other contacts I'd made over the years, people who had seen potential in me but had always been second to the family business. They were surprised, even a little confused by my sudden shift in direction, but they were supportive. The more I talked to people, the more I realized how many opportunities were out there for me. Things I had never even considered before. But even as I started building my new future, there was still that small part of me that wondered if I was making the right choice. I had worked so hard to be part of the family business. I had spent years shaping my identity around it. Now, I was walking away from that identity. Was I being reckless? Was I being selfish? The doubts crept in when I least expected it, during quiet moments at night, when I was working on my business plan or catching up with old friends who were still in the family industry. They'd ask how things were going, and I'd say it was all moving forward, but deep down, I felt a little unsure. It wasn't until I sat down with Sarah one afternoon that I started to really feel like this was the right path for me. "I know, you're scared," she said, her voice calm but reassuring as we sat at a cafe. "It's normal. Change is terrifying. But if you don't take that leap, you'll always wonder what could have been. And the people who are meant to be in your life, your real friends, your supporters, they'll be there no matter what." Her words hit me hard. She was right. If I kept holding on to what I knew, I would never truly discover who I was without it. I needed to take the chance. The following week, I registered my business. It was official, the first step toward my own future. It wasn't some grand gesture or a dramatic moment, but it felt monumental to me. I had just set myself free. I threw myself into work, meeting with potential clients and slowly starting to build a name for myself. It wasn't easy. Nothing ever is. But it felt right. Every time I secured a new client or nailed down a business deal, I felt the weight of the past lift just a little bit more. I was doing it on my own. I was proving to myself that I could succeed without the family business. But then one day, my phone rang. It was my dad. I hadn't spoken to him much since our conversation. I had been so caught up in my own life, my own future, that I hadn't thought much about them. But now, as I looked at the phone screen, a familiar feeling of dread settled in. "Dad," I answered, my voice tentative. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. "How are you doing?" I hesitated. "I'm doing good. Really good, actually. Business is picking up, and I'm starting to feel like I made the right decision." "I'm glad to hear that," he said. There was a pause, and I could almost hear him taking a deep breath on the other end. "Listen, I wanted to apologize again, for everything. For not telling you the truth sooner. For not giving you the chance to help us." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Dad, I already forgave you. It wasn't just about the business. It was about trust. And I'm learning to trust myself now." He sighed. "I know. I just want you to know that we're proud of you. We've always been proud of you." I felt a tear slip down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. This wasn't about the past anymore. This was about moving forward. "Thanks, Dad," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I appreciate that." We talked for a few more minutes, catching up on little things, the family, the house, the weather, but the conversation felt different now, lighter, less tense. And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person I was when I had walked into that living room weeks ago. I had changed, yes, but in a way that made me stronger. I was becoming who I was always meant to be. The days following that conversation with my dad felt like a new chapter of my life was truly beginning. I had finally let go of the past. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but I was starting to feel at peace with my decision to move forward on my own. There were moments, of course, where doubt crept in, especially when I hit bumps along the way. Running my own business was a roller coaster. There were highs, like when I landed a major client, and lows, like when things didn't go as planned and I had to pivot. But with each challenge, I felt myself growing stronger. My parents and I had settled into a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. We had learned to communicate more openly, and though we didn't always agree, we respected each other's paths. The distance I had felt was slowly closing, not because I had gone back to the family business, but because I had gone back to them. Not in the way they had expected, but in a way that felt true to who I was becoming. One night, about a month after that phone call with my dad, I found myself sitting in my apartment, scrolling through old photos. There were pictures from my childhood, from the early days of the family business, and memories that had once felt like an anchor now felt like pieces of a life I had left behind. I wasn't angry anymore. I had forgiven them, and I had forgiven myself. It wasn't the ending I had imagined, but I had come to realize that sometimes the best stories are the ones that don't go as planned. And then, as if the universe was confirming my new sense of peace, I received an email. It was from Sarah, the woman who had helped me find my way. She was offering me an incredible opportunity, an exclusive partnership with her consulting firm to help launch new businesses. It was the kind of opportunity I had always dreamed of, but I had never thought I'd actually get the chance to pursue. I couldn't believe it. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I proved that I could carve out my own path, independent of the family business. I called her immediately. "Sarah, this is incredible. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity." She laughed softly on the other end. "You've worked hard for this, and you've earned it. I knew you had it in you. Now it's time for you to shine." As I hung up the phone, I felt a wave of excitement wash over me. I was doing it. I was living my dream. The business was thriving, and I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving too. But the best part? I wasn't doing it alone anymore. I had learned that it was okay to ask for help, that it was okay to accept love and support without feeling like I had to prove myself all the time. My family, my friends, and my new colleagues all played a role in this journey. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset. It was a quiet moment, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything I had been through. The struggles, the heartbreak, the tough decisions, all of it had brought me to this place. I thought about the voicemail, the one that had started all of this, the message that had seemed like the end, but in reality, it had only been the beginning. A beginning of discovering who I was without the expectations of others, without the safety net of the family business. The last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer defined by the business or by the approval of my parents. I had created my own life, one that was full of possibility, growth, and love. And that was enough. I hope you've enjoyed this journey with me. If you've been following along, please like, comment, and subscribe. I would love to hear what you think about how things turned out and any thoughts you have on your own personal journeys. Thank you for being a part of this story.